So, Ashton, welcome aboard, man. Thanks again so much for making time.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Brian. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Me too. So, the reason this makes sense is because this is a search for truth at heart, right? Searching for political identity, reevaluating my narratives, my assumptions, and really, that's all it is. Do I want to keep voting for Democrats like I have my whole life? Um, but when you start doing that, honestly, you run into this issue where, like, where do you stop with the questioning of the narratives, and how deep does the rabbit hole go? But it's
Mhm.
part of the process. And so we're searching for truth. And from there, it should be obvious what the proper role of government is, and politics should be easy. So at bottom, it's all about truth and questioning narratives. Um, so there are people who drive their cars to and from work, or maybe they work from home. Maybe they're atheists, maybe they're agnostic, but they really can't fathom. They're like muggles, if you will. The normies, I guess, is what we would call them. They think that there couldn't
Yeah,
possibly something be happening on a tremendously grand scale in front of our eyes, or maybe
yeah,
outside of perception. So, where do we begin? I mean,
yeah. So,
tell me.
so first of all, I think I can kind of glean some of your political comings and goings of that last few years because it's probably similar to mine, which is trying to understand how deep the rabbit hole can go, how far you want to jump in it, how much of what we've been getting fed is truth, and how much of it is fiction. And that's what I've been trying to determine for the last 6 months. I started off with this investigation trusting everything that I had heard on the media regarding the missing plane, Malaysian Airlines Flight 370, that supposedly it went to the South Indian Ocean, that it was supposed to be some pilot suicide narrative, right? And I had begun to question the same types of things that you're talking about from what the media presents to us. I used to be what I would call a CNN brain Democrat voter for my whole life until about 2020 and started to really question a lot of the stuff that was out there. Now, this isn't to say that I have become, done a full 180, more so that I've just begun to look at things with a skeptical eye, not just take things at face value and instead look into them. And that's what I started to do with the MH370 investigation. We started in August. And I say we because one of the first things I did was I begged every major news, media, et cetera, organization to look into what we're calling the MH370 videos and look at the evidence. And nobody would. Not a single person, not a single entity would look at them. And I said, okay, well, if they're not going to do it, we're going to do it ourselves. I'm going to do it myself. And I began the hashtag MH370X around August, I think it was 14th, if I remember correctly. And it's been 6 months or more since then. And I started to accumulate a bunch of people who wanted to find out the truth of various political backgrounds, scientific backgrounds, educational backgrounds, etc. And one of the first things you learn is that pedigree, credentialism, etc., means nothing today, nothing at all. And that's going to hurt the feelings of a lot of people who spent their entire many years in academia. But sadly, it's the truth is that the word expert gets thrown around like a weapon to make people not think for themselves. And what we've uncovered as a summary is that they're not even official narratives. That's the crazy part. It's just the narratives that are out there are basically all a lie. The narrative that this was some kind of pilot suicide is an abject lie. There's no evidence for it whatsoever. The official narrative is that there's only two aspects to the official narrative. One is that this plane turned around while it was under control, and that the plane is missing, right? And they don't know, right? They say that it's unlikely that it was potentially like a hijacking scenario, they say it was unlikely that it was a emergency maintenance event and that the plane turned around. And this is where you have people run wild with their theories, right? And most of them are on the aspect of they're trying to keep it as grounded in reality as they can. But when we look at the MH370 videos, we start to realize there's something pretty fantastic at play, and that rabbit hole might be pretty deep.
Right. So when people start talking about aliens, interdimensional well, first of all, let me start this.
Sure.
What a really interesting thing to think about is obviously the military is more advanced, or these private entities, than what the public has. That's just an obvious place to start.
Mhm.
And the question is how advanced, but what is so when I think about aliens or interdimensional beings, often what
Mhm.
people say is there are multiple narratives, and that's where it gets confusing. I just want to say, what's the narrative, guys? What's the story? So in your study of this case, is there a narrative? Obviously, there's going to be a counter narrative, and we'll address whatever the main counter narrative is to what your research
Yeah.
is concluding so far. But is there a single main narrative that you're leaning towards, or that your research is leaning towards, or is it a complex array of narratives?
I think that over time it's focused down. So the first in-person podcast I did talking about the videos was with Tony Merkel of the Confessionals, still one of the best to date. But you can tell there that based on the evidence, I wasn't sure if we were dealing with a situation in these videos where it was some kind of UFO event, some kind of non-human intelligence event, or if it was a situation where it's a potential espionage event. And the problems with that is that there was some the details of when you look at the videos, you can't, and the plane going missing and going dark over the South China Sea, the fact that we've got these Iranian passengers that are on board the plane that are on stolen passports with fake identities and have changed their appearance, the fact that the Immersat satellites, one of them just stops pinging before the plane takes off, which makes it almost impossible to track the plane, because if you have two satellites pinging, you can triangulate the position. Instead, we just had one. Right. So you look at this stuff, you can go, well, that would be indicative of an espionage event.
Mm,
And then you go look at the MH370 videos, and you're looking at orbs defying gravity. It's not little balls of metal, but literal plasma fields like ball lightning. And they're circling the plane in a perfect 120-degree sinusoidal pattern. It's clear that it has purpose. We're looking at two videos, not just one, but two in perfect synchronization. One is clearly from a drone, which we believe is an MQ-1C Gray Eagle. And then the other one is called satellite video, which we have no frame of reference for what a satellite video even looks like, right? So we look at this and we go, well, I don't know. Is this some kind of UFO event? Is this some kind of other thing going on? From now, what we've been able to uncover is that with a high degree of certainty, using more evidence than any other theory by far, and I mean by far, the other theories aren't even close to using the amount of evidence that we have to use. The only thing that we've thrown out is the Immersat pings after 1840 UTC. That's it. We even include the Immersat pings before then. And if you look at the data, which I've done, you can see that there's hundreds of rows of data. It gets to 1840 UTC, and then all of a sudden there's 10 rows for the next 5 hours. And the pattern changes in them at that exact moment as well.
mm,
No experts out there can explain this. What the experts literally say is they scream in all caps on Twitter, it's normal. It's normal. I wish I could make that up, but that's
mm,
literally what they do. And that doesn't make me feel any better about the situation, especially when those are the experts that came up with a novel method, brand new method of interpreting these pings. So what we've concluded is that if you throw those pings out, taking all the rest of the evidence, it clearly was a lithium ion battery fire. There was 487 pounds of lithium ion batteries in this plane, and 2 pallets of them were near the main equipment center, which is also known as the electronics bay. Very likely could have disabled the plane when they exploded. And to me, it's not. I used to think maybe this was an accident. Now I'm leaning towards it really was an espionage event. That it's too complicated. Initially, my first thoughts when the plane disappeared back in 2014 were they had to be hijackers, right? But it was too sophisticated. And now you think, okay, well, if you now bring in espionage, then the obvious culprit, I'm an American, but the obvious culprit's the United States government. They have the most capability, the most know-how. They would have seen the plane crash and had it pinpointed the very next day. The fact that they've been obfuscating about what they know, the fact that they were calling Malaysia, the White House was calling Malaysia every single day, says this was an espionage event, right? The fire is supported by 19 real people, not Excel rows on a spreadsheet, but real people that all corroborate the same event. We've got the batteries on there. We even have a Chinese only Mayday call that indicates the time right around the same location we think the videos happen in the Nicobar Islands. saying that the plane was disintegrating and attempting an emergency landing, which is consistent with the videos and consistent with another witness, Catherine T, who sees the plane glowing orange, billowing smoke, flying low, no navigation lights, and potentially doing an emergency landing maneuver. And you just go, how can I need more evidence than this? Then the problem is, why would you cover that up? If it's just a fire event, why would you cover it up? Well, if it's espionage and you're going to break out your, I'm just going to call them superconductive harmonic orbs, magic orbs, whatever you want to call them, gravity defying orbs that can disappear a plane, then that's the obvious reason why you have to cover it up, is you can't let that technology be known to the public, right? And then this is now where the MH370 videos, 370 videos intersect between conspiracy and UFOlogy. My opinion is, and I think aliens can be real. I have no problem with it whatsoever, honestly. I haven't seen them personally. I just don't really care that much. Same thing about floating crafts. They're cool. I thought it was neat. I've looked at a lot of videos since 2017. Never did I think, holy crap, I got to start talking about this, until I saw
Right.
these videos, because this is advanced technology that will reshape our planet, right? This is technology that's 100 years more advanced than what the public knows, maybe 1,000 years. If this is really technology that we got from reverse engineering, which in my mind, crazy as it sounds, is the most likely option, then this technology could be thousands or millions of years more advanced than we would naturally get to without having been, put in its presence, so to speak.
Yeah, it's just amazing. So we'll get to motives for
Sure.
the crash or the disappearance, who would have motivated if indeed it was some sort of espionage act in a minute. But I
Mhm.
wanted to say that obviously, for you, obviously, but for myself and for the audience and for this conversation, we are assuming that the videos that you've reviewed are true. We're
Yeah.
obviously making that assumption. I just wanted to address that. No reason to doubt it that I'm aware of. But so I'm just walking through it in my head. So assuming these videos are true that you've been analyzing, um, then I already made one mistake, which was to assume that it was some sort of alien intervention or some sort of super being, right? Interdimensional being. But the reality is, all the big names, all the biggest voices are talking about these concepts. And whether that means they're crazy, or we're just amplifying the craziest voices today in society, or for a more
Mhm.
reasonable, logical reason, um, everyone's talking about it, except my parents, maybe, who probably think I'm crazy. But so I mistakenly introduced it by assuming that it's alien intervention or beings, but it could just be advanced human technology. And you did hint at your answer, though, when you said the most likely scenario was some sort of ET intervention or something like that. So we're living in strange times, potentially, huh?
Yeah, so the ET thing, honestly, early on, for the first about week or so, I would say, I was sure we were looking at some alien orbs, right? Because it's so out there. That's why I don't get upset or at all when other people think that, right? The only thing I don't like is when people say, "Oh, Ashton's saying that aliens zapped the plane." They love to say that. They love to say, "Oh, Ashton thinks the aliens zapped the plane to another dimension, the Xenu
Hmm.
dimension, or whatever," right?
Right.
And I just go, "Okay, you've never listened to anything I've said."
So set
Um,
it, so straighten it out for me
yeah,
too. What
because
is the narrative here?
and I can understand that, from the layman's perspective, you look at that, you go, "That's wild. We don't have anything like that." I even think to Matt Gaetz when he was at the UAP hearing, and he says, "I saw a video that nobody else saw of some orbs in a or diamond formation, and it can't be human technology, right?" And that's what I thought at first too. But then I dug into it more, and
Hmm.
when you look at the evidence strongly, like you look at the drone video, and you can tell they're filming the plane before these orbs even show up. And this is like they may have been filming way before that too. We don't know, right? They're filming before the orbs show up. These orbs are moving at 2,000 miles an hour and then matching the speed of the plane within seconds. They're completely defying gravity, both from a perspective of up and down, as well as pulling themselves forward. They're like creating their own gravity lanes. We call them geodesics there. And then the drone operator like zooms in because they want to get the best intelligence of what's going on with the orbs. And they zoom out as well right before the zap happens. And we've also got this satellite video, which we've determined to be the SIBRS system, space-based infrared system, which would have been operationalized to track the plane. And you start to collect this, and you go, "Wait a minute, this isn't a random occurrence. We didn't just randomly watch this plane on fire get orbed away by some aliens. This is an operation, right?" And that's when it woke me up and I went, oh my goodness, like they've been talking about ufology, how we, like, even with Roswell, there's this lore about we gave Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, these crafts, right? And this is how they've been hiding it, using to protect from FOIA requests. Well, if that's the truth, if that's the case, then absolutely what we're looking at here is Lockheed Martin orbs. And there's several patents. The way that this works from talking to engineers and scientists is that it's not one individual thing. You're not going to get the patent for multi-use, UFO that can do all this stuff. They're all broken up into pieces. The patents that you should look at are Salvatore Pais' patents: inertial mass reduction for a transmedium craft, high frequency gravitational wave generator, and then he also has a one about achieving room temperature superconductivity through high frequency vibration as well. So you look at these patents and you realize if you put it together, what do you get? You get some orbs that can float around. The other one that's really big that Bob Greenyer talks about is coherent matter wave beam. And the reason why I started to independently realize that that one was important is that when I started talking to people about room temperature superconductivity, it's an element that's required in order for these types of effects to be achieved. But it's not, it's more like you need something that this matter wave beam can basically cause superconductivity to occur. Is that what you want? Is you need resonance in your waves for them to make love. And now you start to achieve these types of effects that are similar to second order effects that are similar to the double slit experiment. The idea of like rebuilding the wave function, where something can go from a deterministic point to a probabilistic point. From a practical perspective, what we're talking about here is Star Trek warp drive. We're talking about the Alcubierre drive, the ability to bend space-time through extremely high, powerful electromagnetic fields, such a degree that it breaks the Schwinger limit, that it can then create like an azimuth around the plane, a bubble, so to speak, where now you can have this localized effect where the object is able to travel from the outside frame of reference faster than the speed of light. Um, and this is where you start to realize that if you start digging into the history, which is what I've been doing, and digging into electrical engineering, which is where I've decided all the secrets of the universe are now hidden, this technology may go back almost 100 years. I couldn't believe it, but even the Philadelphia experiment was 81 years ago. And I just watched a long documentary about it where now I actually think that might have happened. We might have actually figured out teleportation before we even dropped the atom bomb. And now we wouldn't have been able to potentially do it the same way we see in the MH370 videos back then. Back then, what they did is they created a destroyer from scratch, that they had these specific devices on it that created these very powerful magnetic fields. Now we potentially just have the ability where we can have floating orbs that are sucking the energy, the 0 point energy from space-time itself, while they're traversing through the sky, through the water, through space, transmedium, and then creating this sinusoidal pattern around the plane. And then they kind of contract, or they close in on the plane, which amplifies the energy output to a degree where it can then break that Schwinger limit. And then within the blink of an eye, the whole thing is just not there anymore. And it's not that it's being dematerialized and rematerialized. It's a matter of it's moving at or above the speed of light. There's what we need for this to be possible are two things, just two. You need an extra dimension, the idea that there is something beyond our reality that we're looking at here, an underlying matrix. Some people call it the ether, counter space. There's a number of different names for it, but the idea that there's a blank slate underneath this canvas that we are painting on, which is our reality. The other thing you need to understand is that space, right, as we understand it, is not empty. Is that because you have that underlying framework, there's always these vacuum fluctuations going on that we can manipulate, we can use for propulsion, we can use for energy, we can open up our system and we can extract energy, borrow energy from that system, and get what we would call over unity, which is more energy than we are locally putting into the system. If you understand that those two things are real and consistent with the laws of physics, we can bend the laws of physics. We don't need to break them. We don't need brand new physics to understand it. Then you can realize that what we see in these videos is not only possible to be real, but we don't need aliens to explain it either.
So, okay, that's interesting. So I have two questions on narrative for you. One about the
Sure.
MH370. If it's not, Ashton says alien teleported the plane. What might it be that we have human technology that could teleport the plane?
Yeah, and you hear people talk about it all the time.
which would
Jack
be
Sarfati
derivative
talks about it.
which would
Mhm.
be derivative of alien technology, though, is
Yeah,
what
I think
we're
it
saying.
is, and I think that because if you think about it, what's the big limitation on aliens visiting us? Stuff's too far away, right? Even if you go,
Right.
I think it's like 5% of the speed of light, it'd take like 100,000 years to get here from Alpha Centauri, the closest star, 4 light years away. Right now, when you start talking about distances longer, that just becomes completely implausible, right?
Mm.
So the speed of light is too slow. That's a direct quote from Dr. Stephen Greer. You've heard Dr. Stephen Greer. I believe he had inside information going all the way back to the Clinton administration. I think that you don't have to agree with everything he says to realize that he saw some technology and knows technology is real. It's out there. He says the same stuff about over unity and literal teleportation that I've been saying, that I independently came to the same conclusion on. Danny Sheehan has a story about how a Coke can got teleported from one room to the other room. And I'm blanking on some additional names, but a lot of people. Oh, Jack Sarfati, I think, has also talked about the idea that teleportation could be real. Salvatore Pais, the one with the patents. I've had several interviews with him on my Hard Truths podcast. You can listen and judge for yourself in terms of what type of person you think he is. I can tell that he's an honest and open guy. All these people are all talking about teleportation being real, and everybody just blanks it out because we just think, oh, well, that's too crazy. That can't
Right.
possibly be real, right? And
It's
I
a
think that it
narrative
can
that
be.
people are unwilling to question.
Yeah, and that's weird because that's one of the big pushbacks I did not expect when I started to. I opened this investigation as part of the UFO community because I thought, oh, this is aliens or this is reverse engineered technology or whatever. And then as I got to the narrative of no, this is United States government third party contractor technology that's hidden in special access programs that they had to break out for a special reason. I don't know exactly why, but we'll talk about that in a minute. When you start to realize that side of it and that narrative of it, now you start to realize like, okay, well, we potentially have this type of technology. It's out there. It is consistent with what these people are saying. And the UFO community pushed back super hard, which is weird to me because you got people talking about there's 57 different races in the Galactic
Right.
Federation
That's what I was
and all
saying
this
about
stuff.
the
And I'm going, well,
confusing scrolling.
how do you think they're getting here, right?
Right.
They're not walking on over here from the next star system, right? Like, and people are like, well, they can do the von Neumann probes. And I'm like, that still takes hundreds and hundreds of years and requires then AI that can self-assemble, right? We're talking biological alien bodies are talking about getting here. In order for this to happen, we need faster than light travel, right? That's what we need. And I think that in order for people to really wrap their brain around it being possible, you just have to ask yourself, do you think that we are currently at the pinnacle of scientific knowledge and evolution at this point, or do you think that there's more to go? Because if there is
Right.
more to go, conceptualize it. The logical next step is ER equals EPR, a unification of quantum mechanics, quantum field theory, and general relativity. The very large stuff, wormholes, and the very small stuff, quantum entanglement, quantum tunneling, quantum teleportation, non-locality. We've proven the small stuff. There's already been several limits have been broken and records set for how far we can teleport information over distances. China's done it several times. I'm sure it's being suppressed by the United States. And then the question is, okay, well, why can't we do that with larger stuff? What's holding us back there? And you'd have the academic people go, there's something fundamentally different about the large stuff than there is the small stuff. But does that really make sense from a trying to understand the universe perspective? Shouldn't it be, doesn't it make more sense that you can scale things up, scale things down, and there should still be these underlying rules for all of the above? And when you think about that and realize that unified field theory has most likely been independently discovered and solved maybe half a dozen times or more over the last 80 years, then you start to come to terms with, oh, wow, not only can we teleport a 777 back in 2014, we might have been able to teleport stuff decades ago, right? And that's where it starts to get scary for me. It was like, that's when I started to realize the framework of what we're dealing with here is this is a decades long suppression of technology that the military industrial complex has had. The last thing I'll say is that I used to think that maybe the military was like 10, 15 years ahead of us. Now I'm like, no, they're like 50 or 100 years. Like this technology probably wouldn't even come out before you and I die, right? If they had their way. But what we're
Right.
looking at here is catastrophic disclosure, which is this idea that somebody leaked these videos and they're military videos. That person probably went to prison, almost certainly went to prison, right, over it. And that's how we are getting it out to the public well before they would have had it come out to us naturally.
Yeah. So for me, the question has to be about these aliens, because whether or not it comes from the aliens, if it's if yes, then that has to be the focus for me. Like,
Sure.
right, because what humans will do with it is almost petty and expected, right? We'll war over it. We'll have our societies that'll all of that. But if it's man-made, which it sounds like is unlikely, then it's very interesting, and it's about governments and shadow societies and all of that and vying for power. But if indeed it comes from the aliens, to me that just has to become the focus of the conversation, and then it goes back to, oh well, 50 races are here and that whole thing in the Confederation. So do you know anything about that larger narrative?
I've heard it. I've been listening to Twitter Spaces and stuff like that. Stephen Greer
And do you
talks
agree
about.
with me? Do you agree
uh,
with me that this has to be, we don't want to seem crazy, but if this is what we're saying is true, likely, then doesn't that have to be explored?
So what I would say is that yes, one leads to the other. Is that if we can teleport objects like a 777 with three orbs, then the whole thing gets opened up for aliens visiting us, and saucers, excuse me, having been around for 70, 80, 100 years or more, thousands potentially, right? It even makes me question, what about ancient civilizations, right? Could they have been getting, help or whatever from other beings? Does some of the stuff that gets painted on the walls where you see like, or in paintings where you see like little UFOs and stuff in there, is there more to some of that stuff? But the reality for me is that, like I said before, just don't care, because
Mm,
like, what does it actually change day to day for you, right? For me, it doesn't
mm,
change anything day to day, right? There can be 57 civilizations out there, and we could be a prison planet. At the end of the day, I still got to go to work tomorrow, and I'm still going to go see my family and hang out with them. And it doesn't change that. What changes my life is the technology. Is that if this computer that I'm working on here could be 1,000 times more powerful, that we could move electricity from California, from solar plants, all the way to the Midwest, and solve energy problems by moving green energy around without degradation and loss due to heat at all. That we could fly around on hoverboards like Back to the Future, and then much more, like fusion power, like portable fusion power trapped by a magnetic field using room temperature superconductors. That will change everything about our entire planet. So to me, that's what the difference is. And if there are 57 races, and we can talk about what those implications are, then the concern there is that we have to use this technology to catch up, right? They're going to be thousands or millions of years more advanced than us, and we are just ants to them. They can wipe us out in an instant if they want to, destroy the whole planet, right? And if so, then we need to try to catch up so that we can defend ourselves, right?
mm.
Now, the last thing I'd say is that what I've also come to conclude is that, and I was going to clip, I think Richard Dolan said basically the same thing a couple of days ago on the Fade to Black podcast, but I've been saying it for a while, which is that this technology is most likely the end of our civilization as well. Is that this is such, if you read Salvatore Pais' high frequency gravitational wave generator patent, he mentions amplifying energy to such a degree that you could destroy a planetoid or asteroid. Well, I think he's being coy there, because really what that means, if you scale that up, is you could destroy the entire planet. You might be able to form a black hole. You might be able to create a big bang, right? You might be able to destroy the sun. So this is the type of
Oh, I
technology
just got
that,
chills, dude.
and you should,
I mean,
because this is
what?
what I ask all these UFO people. I asked Stephen Greer, Dr. Stephen Greer, I said, can this be turned into a weapon? And how do we avoid destroying ourselves? Because if you look around at the face of our planet, these wars that we have, even going back to like ISIS terrorists, how long would we really last with not just nukes, but like weapon where like one person just has to say, I had a bad day, I'm going to push the button and end it for everybody, right? I don't think we would last. I think this can explain the Drake equation. I think this can explain the Fermi paradox. If people aren't aware of these, that means how many civilizations do we think are out there? Why is it that we don't see civilizations everywhere? There's two ways to look at it. Either we're not looking at the right way, and they are out there, or the another way is that potentially they achieve a certain level of technological superiority and then they destroy themselves, right? And that's personally what my fear is. And it even makes me question whether or not I want to be talking about this kind of technology. But like I told you before this, I have no strings and I have basically no filter when it comes to this stuff. So I'm just getting it out there because I want to push the conversation forward. I look at myself like, I don't know if you ever watched South Park, but When
Oh
I was
yeah.
growing up, South Park was pushing the limit of what was allowed on television, right? And they got so much hate for it. You know, what words were allowed, what topics you could talk about. That's how I see myself with respect to the UFO community. They all hate that I'm bringing this stuff up. Both sides hate the skeptics, you know, this is too much, too crazy. The believers, no, I believe in 57 races, but I can't believe in teleportation, right? I'm pushing the conversation to the difficult things that people don't really want to consider.
Okay, so first of all, that's really interesting how you're not being widely accepted by the UFO community. To me, it would seem simple, but again, it just goes into this idea that it's a complicated set of narratives. But
Mhm.
what you're doing in light of the evidence, which are these videos that you've studied, you're going in a very practical direction, an engineer's direction, maybe if you will. Um, what's important? You're saying on the human scale realm, and for whatever reason, I just go right to the grand narrative realm. I want to know. Like for me, that's just where I like to go to. But perhaps all that matters in the end is what we do with it, or perhaps both. But either way, they're both fascinating lines to go down. But I understand where you're coming from, and thank you for explaining it to me.
Mhm.
So, okay, the idea that private companies have this advanced technology, and for some reason, do you want to get into the reasons why they might have zapped
Sure.
the plane?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so the most likely motive is going to be the 20 free scale semiconductor scientists. Now, we don't know for sure, but 20 scientists and engineers from the same company is way too many. Anybody that's worked at a big company knows that your company will have policies over like 2 to 3 people from the same company of the same plane. They even put out press releases afterwards saying how important the people were that were actually on this plane. And if you think about it, they worked for this company called Freescale Semiconductors. I like to call them Freescale Superconductors because we found a 2005 NSA, that's National Security Agency report, that talked about the commercial emergence of room temperature superconducting microchips. If you guys have been paying attention to LK99 and the various superconductivity news today that I've been blasting, room temperature superconductors or high temperature superconductors, if we want to be politically correct, are absolutely real. I think they can happen via both metamaterials as well as they can be induced using the right electromagnetic effects. And when you have this type of stuff now, this is where it allows for all the magic to happen, right? It's the idea of that you can have a device like the coherent matter wave beam that can cause can induce a superconductive state where now you can create like a bubble around the plane. And most likely, that NSA report, mentions Freescale Semiconductors 9 times throughout it. It mentions that it would be available by 2010 or 2012, but only if the government helps fund it. And the company had signed an agreement to help serve the RF power needs of U.S. aerospace and defense. The company was directly connected to the United States military and defense. So the most logical explanations are that if it's an espionage scenario, they are preventing those people from defecting to China. That there were 8 of them were Chinese nationals, 12 were Malaysian nationals. They could have been bringing intellectual property to China because whoever has this technology controls the world. So that could be a big enough motive to prevent that from happening. The other alternative could be that since there's a fire scenario, if we didn't start the fire intentionally, then it could be a scenario where you're trying to save those people. That's your intellectual property that you don't want to lose. And now therefore, you're going to break out your orbs because this plane is doomed. Like if it couldn't land in Penang, which is the first place it went to, then the next landing spot was going to be the ocean in the middle of the night. And the chance of pulling a Sully Sullenberger in the ocean is basically nil. That plane's going to rip apart and everybody's going to drown. So,
Mm.
or they're just going to die on impact, one or the other. So you break out the orbs. The other possibilities are a test of some sort. I think this is now very, very unlikely. I don't think the test is super likely because you would just do it on a plane that's not full of people. And then the last option, which I do like, is like a VIP scenario. And they wouldn't have to be related to Freescale Semiconductor, but still probably are. That there's this one person that can have their rescue me button. And the reason why I like that narrative is the one thing I've learned. One other thing I've learned about this is that politicians and rich people in this world know this type of technology is real. They know that we can create over Unity devices. They get them created for themselves from scientists that are in these special access programs that are working on this stuff that Congress will never find out about. Um, and that makes sense because the way the world really works is not what you know, it's who you know. right? And that's what makes me think that maybe there was one person that had the right connections on that plane that said, we're effed. You need to break out the orbs, because otherwise this is a huge risk, right? Because what happens if the videos end up getting out, which they did, right? Now you have to create this whole cover story. You have to vilify all these witnesses. You have to present a fake narrative in the media that you get everybody to believe in. And then you have to prevent anybody like me from finding the videos and talking about them. Now you can still discredit them, and we can talk about some of the debunks and the way that they've done that.
Before we do,
Yeah,
though,
go ahead. So that's the
so
motive, though.
that's a fascinating or rescue. This is absolutely fascinating. Where did they go? Right?
Yeah.
That's the big
So
question.
we have some evidence of that too. Now this is more on the circumstantial side, but there is some hard evidence as well. So first thing is a B777 fire suppression device washes up in the Maldives just a couple weeks later. I think it was at the end of March. And the Malaysian Minister of Defense just says, nope, nope, couldn't be it. And it gets reported on as like a bomb. But you look at it, it looks like this metal sphere, right? And it looks like one of these cartoon bombs a little bit. Now, if you just go Google B777 fire suppression device, you can tell it's a B777 fire suppression device. Like the way these things work is when there's a fire, they automatically deploy at a high flow rate. And then there's secondary ones that have a low flow rate that can last for 3 to 4 hours. So you'll have people out there go, no, it couldn't be a fire because they would destroy the plane in 10 minutes. They're liars or they're just misinformed. I don't know which. I actually, there's a Beast article, Dr. Edel, who talks about this. He actually floated this theory apparently way back when, didn't get any traction about the lithium ion battery fires. So we got this B77 fire suppression device, washes up in Maldives, has serial numbers. You can see the pictures. You guys can Google it right now. You can confirm that I'm not lying. Completely ignored. Maldives gets intentionally excluded from the search, which is weird because it's right there in the Indian Ocean. And then there's 20 islanders on a small island. I don't have the name, but I would say it wrong. It's like Kuvo Haduvo. I'm probably butchering it. Please don't at me. 20 islanders on this small island of 3,000 people. They don't see jumbo jets, right? Jumbo jet flying so low at around 6 a.m. that they can see the red and white stripe of Malaysian Airlines on the windows on it, right? And you just go, okay. The only problem is it was flying from the west and going south. Now, if we can teleport a plane, the direction of incoming travel makes no difference, right? Could be coming from the west, could be coming from the north, east, doesn't matter, right? And this is why it was ignored. I've talked to the experts. They say, well, it was coming from the wrong direction. If it was coming from the east and then went south, we'd be all over it. So they've come up with several pretty implausible theories for what those people supposedly saw. And I think they saw MH370. Now, what's south of that island? Diego Garcia military base. This also just happens to be the same place where basically every conspiracy theory out there said that this plane showed up and went to, because it's in the middle of nowhere in the Indian Ocean. Military base that commercial flights can't go to. I've been told that it's more secretive than Area 51, that they got sketchy stuff going on there, and it's a good spot for it. You know, you've got nobody around. Good place to hide a plane. I even looked at the Google Earth Pro, where you can look back in time at the images. And before 2014, you see all kinds of huge military planes on the runway. Now, maybe this is related to Afghanistan and Iraq. I don't know. But 2014 and beyond, there's like no planes or maybe one plane on the runway. And I found tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of contracts for dredging and construction, some from Black Construction, some from Lockheed Martin. And that makes me think that they built an underground facility there, right? I don't know if I'm going to call it the deep underground military base, but there's something there underground. I think there's probably even an elevator for airplanes as well. Wouldn't be surprised. We found that there was no flights, no departures from Diego Garcia in the 72 hours after March 8th, which is the same day the plane went missing. It's pretty weird. So they could have taken the plane there. They could have taken the passengers off there. They could have landed somewhere else beforehand and then flew it there. We don't have two videos on the other side. What we do, though, have is about 7 days after the plane went missing, a post appears on 4chan claiming to be from Philip Wood, the adult American passenger. It's a black picture. Says that I'm being held prisoner somewhere. I don't know where. I feel like I've been drugged and I can't think clearly. And people looked at that black picture and they looked up the EXIF data on it, and it had coordinates in it that indicate Diego Garcia right there. It turns out that Diego Garcia is actually a CIA black site. That was also revealed by a FOIA many years ago as well. So we have some circumstantial evidence that the plane ended up there,
Hmm.
right? But we can't say exactly what the timeline is.
Hmm. Interesting. So if the idea here is that we have this technology that would end our civilization effectively and require a total restructuring, which is in line with my search for political identity, right? I mean, if that's the case, we're going to have to realign everything. But if that's the case, is there something about 1947, if that's when Roswell happened, is there something special about that time? Or has this been going on forever? You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
no, I do. I think wasn't it the Air Force and the CIA were created right around then as well? Like right after that, right after Roswell, I think.
I'm not sure.
So, if you listen to Hal Puthoff in the Jesse Michaels interview with him and Eric Weinstein, he says that third party contractors know and have this technology, not necessarily the orbs, but advanced technology and physics that are unknown to the public, right? Um, and that they set it up to set the system up in such a way to shield the information, make it impossible to be found. Because FOIA requests are what allow us to get access to the government and what they're doing and hiding. From my own personal inquiries, they have plenty of exemptions. They've given me basically nothing. I've FOIA'd every single agency regarding MH370. I've even FOIA'd the leaker, who we can talk about later. And everything's been rejected in the interest of national defense and foreign policy. And or for intelligence purposes, which if we didn't have anything to do with this missing plane, then boy, oh boy, why are we hiding everything related to it, right? It's not exactly the face of an innocent party to be hiding all the information they know about a plane. But yes, I think that this technology goes back decades. There's a very, very, and I'm going to say very one more time, creepy letter that appeared on a YouTube channel back in early January that is titled to me, actually. It's actually titled Diego Garcia Whistleblower, a letter to Ashton Forbes.
Hmm.
And that's what really made me start to think more about the espionage scenario, where I had been talking more about this rescue scenario. And in it, it mentions that we uncovered this technology in the 60s. And ever since then, we've basically been battling to make sure nobody else gets access to it. And that's a little bit scary because you think about what we might do to try to hide this type of technology. But it also says that in 2000s, we discovered AI and quantum computers from the military perspective again, and that this changed the whole game. That this now made it so that we could control this technology at a much more granular level, and elevated its capability to probably what we're talking about with like teleportation. And when you look at those orbs, the reason why this stuck out to me when I listened to that letter, and I've listened to it at least 40, 45 times, because it's the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me my whole life, honestly. And I'm talking about teleported airplanes, so pretty damn weird. But I was gonna say, you look at those orbs and you go, wow. One of the first things, even going way back months, I went, there's three things about this we need to understand is that you need AI because you need to have some type of super advanced computers controlling these orbs. That I mean, they're keeping in lockstep with the
Hmm.
plane and spinning around this plane is very specific pattern, right? You need to have superconductivity as well. And then
Hmm.
we also need to understand about wormholes is the idea that a wormhole could really exist and could be humanly traversable, meaning you're not going to get ripped to shreds like going through a black hole, right? And
Event horizon.
yeah, exactly. So I soon learned about ER equals EPR, which is what I was talking about earlier, the idea of unification theory of general relativity and quantum field theory. ER equals EPR has been proposed by Leonard Susskind and Juan Maldacena. If anyone knows them, I'd love to talk to them about their theories because I think that they're dead on. But if you understand those three things, then you can understand these videos to potentially be real. That's why I thought the letter, when it talked about quantum computers, was really bizarre because I'm going, if this stuff is real, then I've been not just Sherlock Holmesing this thing, but I've also just been nailing every aspect of the science that's required for it, which even creeps me out a little bit. And so I've had engineers talk to me and say, "Yeah, this is why I want to talk to you because you seem to understand what's happening here." Versus mainstream academia, mainstream physicists and scientists are going, "No, no, that can't be possible. I haven't been told about that. No, they can't be hiding this kind of technology that would get out. Blah blah blah." Like, unfortunately, it's way easier to hide this stuff than even I would have thought.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And for me, going back to the theme of questioning narratives and how deep does rabbit hole go, and how if what if I'm to say that what most people accept, the normies accept, the muggles, like I call them, accept, um, is probably a limited set of knowledge and not all that there is. If that's the case, then uh, how deep does a rabbit hole go? Anyway, I forget what I was going to say, but um, so much more to meet than meets the eye is possible. I lost my train of thought.
No, you're fine. I think that the big question I have is from talking to these engineers and learning about the science. I wonder like where even is the line between fiction and reality anymore, right? And this is where it's very difficult to stay grounded, not
Yeah,
just from the conspiratorial angle where you start to wonder about all these other conspiracies and directed energy weapons and stuff like that. Going, like, was I
yeah,
was I the normie? But then the other side of
right.
it too, which is like what about the esoteric stuff? Like can psychic powers be real? Can telepathy be real? All this stuff that's very
And the
esoteric.
spiritual element, and thank you for picking up my
Yeah.
covering for me. And I did remember what I was going to say, but is there a spiritual component as far as you understand? That's a
For
question.
me, absolutely. Like I've become more spiritual. I'm on the record saying that. I think that there is absolutely no inconsistency between religion or faith and science at all.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it's because of what those things I said before, the prerequisites. We need an extra dimension to understand that this can be possible. And if there's an extra dimension that this is really a matrix, so to speak, then that means we live in a construct. That means that I think that the holographic principle is probably the best explanation for our universe. People like the word simulation. I've been told by one of my friends that I'm not allowed to use that term anymore because it degrades a little bit the sanctity of our existence. And I agree. Actually, I don't think simulation is the right word for it because our
Hmm.
lived experiences are still real. This is still real that we're experiencing. But if there is a construct, then that would imply a creator, right? And that's the thing that I think is wild for me as somebody who was raised Roman Catholic, that I became atheist in my later teen years, and then I moved more towards an agnostic role. And now I'm back on the bandwagon of theism. I'd say I align closest to Buddhism personally, but I have obviously a lot of background in Catholicism and Christianity. So, I like the Bible as well and some of the teachings that it gives, but really all religions in general. I just think that if there is this construct that we have around us, that the idea of reincarnation doesn't seem that crazy anymore. The idea that our souls are like our bodies can be like an antenna that's pulling in information from some other place, right? Especially if you have this idea of faster than light communication being real and travel. So yeah, for me, I think that it absolutely is religious. And then the last thing I want to say too about that is that I expected that because of the narratives I had heard about ufology, that oh, it's the religious military people that are hiding this back from being released, right? Because they think it's demons or something like that. I'm pretty sure that's all bullshit. The religious people will have the least issue with this information, even if there's aliens, right? They're just going to be like, okay, well, let's convert them, right? Or if aliens are real, then God created the aliens too. Like there's no
Then
inconsistency
that explains
in
that,
religion. Yeah,
basically.
it's actually the opposite. It's the atheist people I've found, the ones that I call the CNN brain people that only think that whatever they've been told can be real, that there's nothing special or magical about the world, right? Those are the people that struggle with this information the most. And
That's
that
what I
was
meant by
yeah.
muggles.
Yeah. There you go. So
No,
yeah,
really.
that's my answer. No, I'm with you. Yeah.
No, thank you so much. And first of all, thank you so much. It's been amazing, and you're doing amazing stuff, and it's mind blowing, and it's a serious comment when I say you're doing amazing work. How long has it been going on then? That's why I asked if there's something special about like the 40s, because how long, if there's a secret stuff going on, and again, this is me focusing on the grand narrative rather than the practical narrative that you seem to be focused on. But, you know, if what we read in our history books is not remotely close to being truth or knowledge, one does wonder how long that's been going on, or if there is something special about this time that we're in.
Yeah, and I say if you want to, there's absolutely a very interesting aspect to the history side of it. I think that Jesse Michaels actually just did a really great documentary piece on Thomas Townsend Brown and the idea of hidden anti gravity. And I think that Thomas Townsend Brown absolutely is probably one of the most important, lesser known scientists of our lifetime, or of I guess before our lifetimes of our history. I would say up there with Albert Einstein. as well as Nikola Tesla. Tesla, I think for sure. Again, the thing I found is about electrical engineering, right? That's where all the secrets are. Is that this is all has to do with probably scalar physics, which is the idea of can we manipulate electricity and magnetism in order to create a second order gravitational effect. And I don't know, it can go back a long, long way. I mean, we're talking about Tesla, we're talking about like the early 1900s here. So that's the part where I don't know, is aliens a distraction from us having figured this out naturally? My personal opinion is this is just like JFK would say, if you looked at the history of our 50,000 years of human history and condense it down, we've been progressing so fast that it doesn't seem natural. It seems like we've had artificial boost to how much we've been progressing. And so for me, like, I think there had to be some intervention. I don't know the nature of that, but, and this is like some of the more recent stuff I've kind of come to terms with is that this goes way back. Like when I first started, I thought, oh, I'm going to be the guy that's disclosing this stuff. And you start digging in and you start getting what I call black pilled, where you realize, oh no, they have complete control over all the narratives. They control all the media. People have already discovered this stuff. People have already tried to come out. They've all been discredited, including people like Bob Lazar potentially. And that, this is that we're going up against the beast. This is David versus Goliath here, and I don't have a sling. And so it's not really a reasonable request to think that you're going to be the one to get any of this information to the public. So all we can really do then is talk about it like we're talking about it now, slowly wake people up to this concept that not only do we have really advanced technology, but they've been hiding it for many reasons. One of them being doomsday. Another one, probably because people's brains will literally melt. Like just people will actually go into a catatonic state. For some of the people, at least some of the
Because
muggles.
of the grander narrative, or
I think because you realize that your whole life is a lie, right? There's a lot of these people that have tied their whole personalities to their politics, right? And that the authority will not lie to them under any circumstances.
yes,
And when they were to find out that not only had the authority been lying, but they've been lying to them their whole lives, and basically everything they know is a lie,
yeah, to the
that
deepest nature of
shocks
reality.
people. That shocks people to a degree where they will literally melt down. And that's what I've seen from the UFO community as well, is that the visceral, angry reaction that gets induced by me just being in a space with people is unnatural and also quite scary at the same time. I don't know if a lot of people experience this, but I sit in spaces and Twitter spaces sometimes where I'm not even on the speaker panel and everybody's talking about me.
Mm.
I'm sitting there going like, I'm not
Well,
some celebrity or anything
you
like
must be
that,
doing
right?
great. No, you must be doing great work, right? I
Yeah, I
mean, come on.
guess so. People
Yeah.
are talking about you, but usually it's not good things. A lot of times it's just people
Well,
making
I'm
up like
sorry.
stories about you in their head and coming up with
Mm,
lies about you so that they don't have to listen and they can go back to their cozy world where everything is safe and what have you, right? But
mm.
that's the thing that I get afraid of is that if this were
Well,
to come
that's the whole
out,
thing with the
right?
allegory of the cave with Plato, and I don't
Yeah,
wanna pretend to be I'm a wannabe philosopher, but the core idea being that if you see the reality,
yeah.
beyond the shadows that are projected on the cave, and then you come back to the cave and you tell the people, you will be ridiculed for the knowledge that you
Oh,
have.
that's exactly it, and this has happened many times throughout history, right? Going all the way back to Galileo, even Einstein was considered crazy, right? Now we revere him in science, and that kind of goes back to what is it like? Uh, First they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then whatever, then they build monuments to you or whatever, right?
Mm.
It's like
Wow.
you have to go through these stages where and that's what happens, right? There's also the cartoon where the cows are sitting outside the slaughterhouse and the one guy's going like, they're gonna kill us, they're gonna kill us, and they go, oh, listen to the crazy guy there talking about his conspiracy theories, right? And yeah, that's how it works. Is that my favorite one is the Matrix, though, is that people are so hopelessly inundated by the system that they will literally fight to keep the status quo the same way
Mhm.
that it is, right? And that's the kind of world we live in, sadly. And this is why I've been told, at least, that some people want it to come out because they realize that they've set up the system almost too good, where now people can't believe anything to be
Wow.
real,
Right.
right? And they're like, okay, well, Ashton, if you can get it out there, go ahead. Maybe this is why they haven't called me or tried to stop me, right? It's like because they just it's almost to the point where it's like they don't even have to try to cover it up because the
Right.
system itself just does such a good job of it. And then you
Right.
have some of the people that are like they've been doing this their whole lives, and they're like, Now they're looking at their grandchildren going, crap, my grandchildren's not even going to grow up in a good place. I've been going to the labs and seeing magic happen,
Right.
and we're still driving around gas powered
Right.
cars, right? And they're
Right.
looking at their children going, my children are going to die in a world where none of this even is
Resources are
out.
being fought over for nothing.
Yeah, for nothing, for nothing. And then you have other ones who are literal psychopaths who just get off on the idea that they just know all about the magic technology
Right.
and nobody else does, right?
Right.
And I think that in everybody's minds, the world's not black and white. This is one of the things I hate about politics on Twitter, right? Is that, oh, you're not in the right camp, you're a bad person. I got blocked by a bunch of people just because like I wasn't left leaning enough for them, right? And that
Mhm.
was the only reason.
Yeah.
And it's not black and white. All these sides, you may associate with one side or the other more, but all these sides in their own minds are doing what they think is right for their own noble reasons. Right. And that's
Mhm.
what I think people have to come to accept. And that's what weaves this complex tapestry of how do we get the information out there. And last thing I would say is I even think that a lot of these UFO influencer people that are out there, these big names, people that make the movies and what have you, that everybody reveres, they might have come to terms with this and might have been told as well. And the whole thing might just be a matter of like psychology and trying to like slowly wake people up until you get to a critical mass where now we can be like, okay, yep, aliens are actually real, guys. Don't crucify us, whatever.
Mm.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, we're only operating with what we know in the matrix. If the information matrix has been so completely co-opted, then it is hard to break out. It's just absolutely fascinating. Well, listen, thank you so much for joining me,
Yeah.
for actually explaining to me what the narrative was by the mainstream, which you say is mischaracterizing your work.
Oh,
You're not saying
100%.
the aliens zapped the plane. You're saying it was an espionage act with technology, and that's vastly different. And you're focused on the practical side and the question of what are we going to do? I mean, this was a profound conversation, and perhaps we can just leave it at that. If you listen to this, if you believe it to be true, then you are stunned right now and you're reevaluating your political identity. But we're operating in the political landscape in the information matrix that we have. And so maybe that's why it's so difficult for free thinkers, independent people. I mean, I'm tooting my horn when I call myself those things, like myself, try to figure out right now what's going on. So great conversation, man. Thank you so much for your time. Your work is awesome, and I wish you all the best.
Yeah. If I can just end with one other statement I want to make about the investigation and my findings is that um, that nobody's really reporting on this, right? Even the 10-year anniversary is coming around, and I think a lot of people think the videos are debunked. We didn't go into that, and that's fine. People can find it. I've addressed every debunk that's out there. So my plan is to step away. I'm going to step away from the investigation because I think that it's a point where not enough people are awake yet to accept
Hmm.
this type of thing to be real, and normies or whatever society needs to catch up to this technology. And I think that we will never find the plane in the South Indian Ocean. They can search as many times as they want. They're never going to find it. We would have found it already if it had crashed there. And that every time we don't find it there, and that as time goes on, the science catches up, I think that people will be able to start to come to terms with this story that we've put forth that I think uses more evidence than anyone else. So that's what my plan is. I'm going to retire for a while and see if society catches up to us.
That makes a lot of sense. Going back to the allegory of the cave thing, the cost that it would exact on someone in your situation would be profound, as profound perhaps as the information itself. So totally understandable, man. I support that. Take care of yourself,
Thanks,
and I
Brent.
hope soon enough we'll reconnect when that time comes.
Hit me up anytime, man.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it. Take care.